And the reason why it is very important to discuss animal rights is to understand, and I'll come to my judgment later, that why it is so important to acknowledge and recognize that attribute or that very thing that has intrinsic value and it needs to be protected. Because a right exists when an intrinsic value has to be protected. Ladies and gentlemen, before coming to this hall, we were discussing, and one of our former colleague, Bilkis, she asked me, or rather she observed how every judge is different. The law is the same, the statute is the same, but yet the same statute is interpreted differently. And I explained to her that as a student, when I was studying law, one legal theory that impressed me the most was that of the American realists. The American realists, they hold that law is not just in the statute books. Law, in fact, is the person, the psychological influences over that person who presides the court and who has to interpret that particular law or statute. And probably the way I dealt with the case of animal rights that came to Islamabad High Court then also had something to do with my past. As a child, I had an opportunity to live in the city of London and also study for a while in a school named Primrose School. It was just a coincidence that the school, and you would also be a bit surprised. I'm sorry, I'm not very familiar with how to operate it, but can you just change it for me, the slide? So, I mean, in this school, it's very interesting. I was a child, and this school was located just across a Regent Street and was a few yards from where I lived with my parents. And on the other side, in the neighborhood, was the London Zoo. So in the school, we used to be taught that lions, and they would show us the images of lions in upright savannas or open woodlands. But every morning then, the roaring of the lions would be heard from the zoo. And that was confusing for a child who in the school was taught something quite different. Can we change the... And the London Zoo, you see, took a lot of pride, but it contradicted the images shown to us in the school. It contradicted the actual or how a lion lives in the sea that naturally can be caged. But that was a confusion which existed in my mind. But what happened? Opportunity to read or study law in an institution where they had a special course on Islamic fiqh or usulul fiqh. And you see, usulul fiqh basically is the methodology or principle applied in Islamic jurisprudence for deriving the rulings of Islamic law. And we had some amazing scholars who taught us, because it was the early period of General Muhammad Ziaul Haq. And so there was a lot of emphasis, and we had these scholars who had come from Al-Azhar University and from around the world. And the Pakistani scholar itself, I mean, they were amazing scholars. But the first lecture on Usulul Fiqh was an eye-opener, at least for me and for the other students as well, when we were told that the premise on which these rules and methodology is based is preservation of life. And preservation of life in every form, not just human, but in the form of an animal and in the form of plants. And the same message is common to all the religions, whether it is Judaism, whether it's Christianity. The significance of this principle played a very crucial role in developing the jurisprudence on animal rights. And this year, I was in New York. The New York bar had invited me. So one of the professors from the universities, he asked me a question that why did you also rely on religious grounds while writing the judgment? So I explained to him why this was one of the reasoning that I had recorded in my judgment, and why right to life or the preservation of life is so important. We'll come to it a little later. So I don't know, from there I went to the University of Cambridge. So before going there, one of our colleagues, who is now also in the Supreme Court, had already read at Cambridge. So I went to him and I asked him, you see, give me a suggestion. What subjects would be really useful to take when I'm... So he gave me a very, very wise advice. He said, listen, no one is going to ask you what subject you have studied. Cambridge is a place where you enjoy. So take subjects that you find the easiest so that it gives you sufficient time to enjoy. So one of the subjects that I took was civil liberties. Now civil liberties, it was a bit surprising for me that except for myself, all other students who had taken the subject of civil liberties were from the developed countries. And I wondered why should they take civil liberties as a subject. But obviously civil liberties is important because they protect humans from intrusion in their freedoms and rights by fellow humans. There have been cases of dehumanization of members of the human community. I don't know how many of you, can anyone raise your hand and anyone knows who Otta Benga was? So, not you, you are one of the organizers. I was just So at least one knows who Ota Benga was. This is not very long ago. He was a teenager, a Congolese teenager, who in 1906 was brought to the United States and put in the cage where the apes were incarcerated, or they were the inmates of that cage. Ota Benga was displayed as a savage native of Congolese, you see, someone different. And he was displayed as a human exhibit. So there was a time where even humans treated humans, and not very long ago, because in September 1906, the New York Times gave a headline that Bushman shares a cage with the Bronx Park apes. So humans were treated as, other than humans, they were not persons. They could not file petitions of habeas corpus, but humans were doing this to humans. But Ota Benga wasn't one of them. Saratji Bartman was a woman who in 1810 was brought from South Africa to England, and where she was displayed as an exhibit before paid crowds. And again, you see, till the 50s, 1950s, that also is not long ago. There used to be human zoos. And there were even human zoos in the country or the city which today symbolizes the human rights. Even Geneva had human zoos. The reason why I'm emphasizing all this is that yes, civil liberties was extremely important because humans were treating humans as non-humans. They were not considered as persons for the purposes of a habeas corpus petition. Ota Benga couldn't go to the court and ask for a habeas corpus petition. So, and again you see a marvelous and a legend, Dr. David Attenborough. And very rightly he has stated that it seems very unfair that man should have chosen the gorilla to symbolize all that is aggressive and violent, when that's the one thing the gorilla is not, and we are. And we certainly are aggressive. The powerful throughout human history, the way we have treated humans, that is what we have done. The non-human species, they don't attack humans unless they feel threatened, unless they are hungry. But humans have destroyed humans. Humans have brutally killed humans. Humans don't hesitate in destroying the habitats, the environment. It's not the non-human species. So, even you see, the perceptions need to be redefined. And this was the time when I was in the Islamabad High Court. It was a challenging time. It was a challenging time because even then, I was elevated as the Chief Justice in 2018 and served as the Chief Justice till 2022. And everyone knows, it is no more a secret, that the country, despite there being an elected parliament and elected government, was not governed under the Constitution. Very openly everyone was saying, including the then government, that there was a hybrid regime. And a constitutional court had a very, very important role to play. It had the responsibility of protecting fundamental rights of humans, of the citizens.